Hello guys, it's John here doing another Bottleman video. This time I'm going to be talking about whether or not the prototype system for Bottleman was good. See, I've been wanting to do this for a little while, where I just kind of give a retrospective on the entire prototype line for Bottleman, and yes, I will do this for DX and Godcap once the latter is over, but anyway. Yeah, this video, just kind of a retrospective, going over, the line, talking about some different things, the Bottleman themselves, like the system, kind of just some of the game design, the overall quality, and of course, being the first thing in Bottleman, just kind of the transition from Beat'em to Bottleman, kind of how that went. So anyway, that's basically everything for this, so let's go ahead and get into the actual important parts of the video. So first up, let's just go over every single Bottleman that was released in the prototype line. First appears, of course, Colamaru. Colamaru is a pretty basic Bottleman, but it was a good starting release, I would say. It's a power type with, of course, a drive strip, and you have these kind of wings to use as grips, which is nice. Also, you could press in on the hands, which puts more tension on the core, thereby allowing for a stronger shot, which is very, very cool. So, just kind of a basic power type, but just something that I think works as a good introduction Bottleman. It didn't need to be overly interesting to really accomplish this. Moving on to Aquasports, our first speed type. No longer our introduction to Bottleman as a concept, but our first speed type. So first up here, you do have the rollers and the hold parts, pretty standard for a speed type, it makes sense. And also you have these arms here, which, allow for a magazine to be added in. And this magazine gives you a 3 cal capacity. Pretty basic, again, just a good introduction to the speed type. And for a control type, we of course have Gyokurock. Gyokurock's kind of the weird one here, because it does have a sword barrel, which, yeah, that wasn't the best, I would say. It's kind of an awkward thing, a sword barrel. It doesn't actually help as a barrel as much as you'd hope for, but it's there. Although the only thing it does help with is lining up your shots, and, yeah, this also has a kind of a crosshair up here. So you can line up your shot pretty well. I guess having the barrel here, it's kind of helpful, I guess. But yeah, it's a control type. It's kind of a weird one to start with, but at the same time, it gets the point across. It's supposed to help you aim better effectively, and yeah, I think it does it, so sure. Gyokurock is fine. I also like the design a lot, but yeah, anyway. Moving on to our fourth Bottleman. This is the first release after the initial wave, and they actually did a good job here. Wonder Grape. This thing had a very unique gimmick, utilizing caps. We've never had caps before in Beat'em, and well, not Bottleman, but anyway. We never had caps, obviously, in Beat'em, so now they opt to do something completely different with this sort of new ammo, and instead of loading it horizontally, you now load it vertically. Which, yeah, good concept. It just makes sense, Of course, you have more to do with caps in that regard, since they're not just spherical. So orientation kind of matters there. And with that, yeah, you have a cool, very easy, but just, again, a sensible gimmick. It's nothing crazy for what it is, but it just works, and I think that's all it needed to do. After this, they kind of went interesting, like in an interesting route. I don't know what to say about it, because they kind of just gave us 2 crazy Bottleman pretty quickly here. Of course, with Raijing Milk and Fujin Black, which of course do fuse. I'm going to wait on the fusion, we'll talk about that later, but we'll talk about the base versions for now. Of course, with Raijing Milk, which is a really, really cool Bottleman, one of my favorites of the line, for sure. Maybe my favorite, but yeah. Again, speed type hold parts, has a kind of special slot here to slot in this new magazine it has. These back parts, they kind of act as stabilizers for the magazine, which just, again, it works pretty well. And it even comes with its own type of cap. Yeah, one of the 2 actual different caps before Godcap was a thing. The speed caps with the 3 kind of lightning-shaped cutouts to, I guess, reduce weight a little bit and add some more airflow, which is supposed to make it faster. Sure. And yeah, this magazine has an 8 cap capacity, so pretty crazy overall. Definitely a cool Bottleman and a pretty weird one to see so early on, but you know what? It happens sometimes, so I'll take it. But yeah, it's just a really cool Bottleman overall, so I am a big fan of it. On the contrary, we have Fujin Black, which I don't know exactly what they're trying to do here, I'm going to be honest. You have rollers in the hold parts for a power type. Why? The rollers feel stiff, so maybe they're not as impactful, I guess you could say, as the normal speed type hold parts, but the fact that they're there at all like that is weird. I get it, makes sense for the fusion, but as its own Bottleman, why? Aside from that, though, got a horn to kind of line up your shot, I guess, and got kind of this metal weighting on the back, kind of just gives you a nice big grip as well. Also a long trigger, which is kind of just there, honestly. Again, it works for the fusion, but on its own, it's just kind of awkward. And then a metal cap, the other kind of weird cap here. So yeah, metal cap, pretty cool. Just gives you some extra weight there. And this Bottleman, I think, is nice, but well, in terms of appearance, it looks great. But yeah, has cool ideas going. But again, it just doesn't really work well as its own Bottleman. As a fusion piece, it's amazing, but well, debatable. There's some issues we'll get to, but again, later in the video. So gimmicks-wise, it makes sense for the fusion, but on its own, it's a little awkward, and kind of wish they would have done a little bit more with this thing. We kind of move on after this to a more basic lineup of Bottleman for a little while, of course, with the Skull Pistol. This very much feels like the first proper control type. You have kind of the same thing as Gyokurock, where like the top part of the head kind of acts like a sight, and I guess that's cool. But more importantly, you have a barrel, like an actual barrel. It functions as you would expect, helps you, with accuracy, but might reduce power by a little bit, but hey, that's fine. So, finally, an actual control type. It's just that, so something we kind of needed, though. So, cool. Okay, now we get to the one that I don't know what they're doing here. Kerpeps, what happened? It's a power type. First actual power type with regular hold parts. That's cool. So the gimmick is that it tilts downward. It has like a 0 degree mode, a 5 degree mode, and then like its 10 degree mode, where yeah, you could put this at different intervals, and yeah, it kind of like slides on the ground, or it can maybe ricochet if you go all the way down. It's awkward, I'm not gonna lie. I guess if you're messing around, it's kind of cool, but again, what was the point of this? I feel like this would work better with Beat 'em on. I feel like if you ricochet a marble off the ground, I kind of can see a better idea there at least, but with this, it's just kind of like, why? This one's a little bit awkward to me. I'm not the biggest fan of Kerpeps' gimmick. As cool as it looks, it does look great, but yeah, it's an awkward gimmick for sure. Moving on, of course, we have Salafire. Salafire is a weird one. This is our only speed type to not have any form of like magazine or extra capacity. Has a speed type hold parts though, and its whole thing is that it moves fast. You have these two ball type of things. They're actually the same size as Bidama, which is pretty cool, but helps it move around quickly. Usually you'd consider this like a control gimmick, I feel like, but it can also, I guess, work with the speed as a speed gimmick because it's literally fast. Sure, I guess. But yeah, cool enough, honestly. Also, it does have the capability to fuse with the game piece called Blast Boss, which I do have right here. If I could get the head to... There we go. This is a game piece, talk about it later. But yes, it does have a fusion ability with it, and is our other fusion. But again, we'll talk about the actual fusion aspect of this guy in a little bit. But just as a normal Bottleman, it is fine. Next up, we have Samets. I wish this guy worked a little bit better. But yeah, Samets. You have the roller hold parts. Then there's this trigger, which is kind of a double spring. It's meant to be fast, which I like the idea, but the problem is it gets jammed way too easily. I don't think it's the fault of the gimmick, but it's just unfortunate. Anyway. But yeah, it's supposed to just be faster, and also you do have a 2-cap capacity with the arms here. They kind of taper backwards to give you a little bit of a platform, which acts as a magazine for a second cap. Unfortunately, when you shoot this thing, though, the arms kind of expand outward sometimes, and the cap just flies out from time to time. Doesn't work the best, but again, the idea was actually pretty cool. I don't hate Samets, but yeah, I wish it was just a little bit better done quality-wise. Now, we move on to a funny one here, dual gold. I don't like dual gold. It is weird. I think it looks cool, but its gimmick is just stupid. It's meant to take the 3 unique pieces of the other random collection pulls and puts them all together, I guess you could say. The problem is that the feet and headpiece do nothing. They're just there. Also, the arms here, they're like the Aquasports arms in that they have the magazine port, but there's no magazine. Gimmick-wise, it does have rollers, and then it has the Gyokurock trigger, so it kind of just doesn't do anything. It's just kind of stupid. Just by Aquasports, honestly. What was the point of this? Why'd they do this? Yeah, there's just nothing noteworthy about it. I guess it has a better trigger than Aquasports, I'd say. I like it more, but like, yeah, it just doesn't come with a magazine. I feel like if it came with one, I might say it's a little bit better, but then it's just kind of an alternate take on Aquasports, and at that point it's just like, why? This Bottleman is just awkward. It needed to do a little bit more. I don't really think they did a good job here. Moving on, we have a couple actual good ones here. First up is Sparking Knight. Really, really cool Bottleman here. Now the control type has this whole gimmick of the kind of this ring sight. You could put it down if you want, but you could put it up here. Helps you aim with a really, really nice sight. I'd say probably the best sight in all of Bottleman, honestly. I like it more like the horns and stuff that, or just kind of like random kind of holes that you use as like a crosshair. I like them. I like this one better than anything else, I'd say. But the other part is the rail trigger system. So you attach a plastic piece onto the back of the trigger, which lines up with this groove that sticks out of the feet. And when you put it in there, it kind of helps to reduce movement within the trigger, because when you shoot another Bottleman, sometimes, you know, the trigger can like move around, and like I'm moving it on purpose. So when you shoot, sometimes it might have a little bit more give to it. With this, it's meant to help like kind of reduce it. You can see it moves a little bit, but it's nowhere near as bad. So when you shoot, it's meant to be much more straight, which can help you with accuracy while also helping the sight. It's just a very sensible, good control type, I would say. Moving on, we have 10 Satan. Very, very self-explanatory. This back piece, the power buckle, slots into the back of the arms, spreads them out more by proxy. It kind of forces these front parts in more to kind of press on the hold parts, and when you shoot, this part kind of doesn't allow it to expand out as much, therefore increasing power. It's a basic gimmick, but again, it's a very effective one, and just a very sensible power type, I would say. I like this one quite a bit. And the last actual Bottleman is CC Leon. CC Leon is another control type with a really stupid gimmick, which is that it has this thing where it's like meant to just kind of help you aim with turning. It helps you turn. You can see like the red part kind of lines up, kind of helps you with angles and stuff. But like just turn the Bottleman physically. I think that's a better plan. And even if you want to argue it's slightly more helpful, the problem is that when you twist it, a lot of times it just comes off. You could probably just tell I put zero force into that and it just came off. So again, it just kind of was a lame gimmick to begin with, but because of the kind of quality control issue there, ends up being worthless. And because that CC Land was already kind of boring to begin with, but now it just becomes ass. That's all there is to say about it. So it's not good. So there you go. That is kind of the whole look at the basic, 14 Bottleman releases. Obviously not counting fusions, but overall I think they did a pretty solid job with them. Obviously I had a few complaints here and there, notably things like, dual gold being worthless, but for the most part I think at least conceptually they were pretty good. I'd say like 10 of the 14 that they did a good job on. Maybe 9 of the 14. I'd say Fujin Black and Samets had quality control problems, and, dual gold's dual gold. And then Kerpeps and CC Leon, the gimmicks themselves were questionable, and, well, quality kind of ruined CC Leon even further. But yeah, the other 9 I'd say are, like, good enough. I'm fine with them, so overall, I think the Bottleman releases, they did a good job with them. I don't have any complaints here, so yeah, this definitely gets a pass for me, for sure. So let's move on to the fusions. Okay, the fusions. So, first up, we'll start with Blend Dragon, or Ryuujin Blend Dragon. I would just call it Blend Dragon, but anyway. So, Blend Dragon is kind of a weird one, actually, but it brings together Raijing Milk and Fujin Black, effectively, and all their gimmicks. So you have a mix of speed caps and metal caps, which is cool. You have the rollers out front here from Raijing Milk, and then you can kind of see why they might have used the rollers on Fujin Black, even though I don't really like that, but whatever. The kind of stabilizers for both of them works very well on Fujin Black here, and then for Raijing Milk, they actually come forward to kind of help go out front and also just look better, which is cool. I mean, you got the magazine obviously right back here. That's nice. The long trigger also works for this thing, and its new gimmick, because it actually has a new gimmick, and that is it can shoot double shots. So yeah, it's meant to shoot double shots. I notice sometimes it's just inconsistent, like it doesn't always want to shoot them. I don't know if that's me. I've heard other people talk about this before, but yeah, sometimes it just doesn't shoot double shots properly. But anyway. Also, you do have an extra cap capacity now with 2 cores, so you have 9 caps in here, rather than just 8 that you got initially with Raijing Milk, so that's also kind of cool, but also is a little bit weird with the whole double shot thing that you have an odd amount of caps. Maybe that's just me, but anyway. Yeah, so pretty solid overall. I'm a pretty big fan of what they did here. I do think it's a little bit jank, especially from Raijing Milk, not Raijing Milk, from Fujin Black, just because, again, the this trigger is just a little bit odd, I'm not gonna lie. I don't think this trigger works very well sometimes, and again, the double shot thing, it's a little bit whatever, but yeah. I still like it overall, though. Moving on to Premium Salafire. This is just a giant Bottleman, which I kind of like, and yeah, it's just kind of this. It's just a gigantic Bottleman. You just have the speed core from Salafire here, which is fine. And then you just have a giant grip that you can shoot with. It's also very much planted on the ground because of how giant it is, and you know what? Becomes a control type. I like what it does here. I think it's good. But, I mentioned this last year when I made a video on the fusions. My problem is that Salafire's whole deal was that it was very mobile, and then fusing it to become not mobile at all, I always found that a little bit weird, so not the best design choice there, but I think overall it is still a really good Bottleman. So for the fusions, I think overall they're good, but I think that with Blonde Dragon they need to get a little bit more right with the quality, and just Fujin Black just should not have felt like kind of a leftover just for the fusion, I feel like. But also Premium Salafire, I think, again, as much as I like it, I think that the Bottleman they chose to pair with Blast Boss, not the greatest choice. I think they should have paired a control type with it rather than a mobile speed type. That is very odd, but anyway. Fusions, though, yeah, I still do like them quite a bit, so that's good. Alright, so now we've gone over everything in particular, so let's go ahead and talk about the actual system design of the prototype line of Bottleman. So, I have the core here of Salafire just here. I mean, I already had to take this thing apart to make Premium Salafire, so I might as well just do this. So anyway, so the actual core itself, it's pretty basic. You can tell it is quite literally kind of a Bottleman, in a literal sense, so cool. Anyway, as far as assembly goes, I don't have a disassembled prototype core, so I can't really show that, but I think assembly has a couple glaring problems. Like the core itself is fine, I don't have a problem with this core conceptually, but again, putting on the trigger just is not enjoyable. It's a annoying process. I felt like it's kind of make sure the spring's not like getting caught, and it's just not a great process. I wish they maybe would have had a better way to attach the trigger. But more importantly, I think one of the biggest flaws of the prototype line, if not the biggest, is the connection point here on the cores. Why? It's sort of like this little buckle type of thing, which I don't like to begin with. But why make this on a curve? Why design the main connection point on a curve and make the plastic have to curve with it? I feel like this is just a recipe for disaster, which we saw in the prototype line with a lot of breakages. This was not a good spot to have a main kind of connection point for the cores being, held together and whatnot. It was not a good plan. Also, what's worse is with power types especially, this is a speed type, but still, when you're shooting and the hold parts expand outward, you're potentially putting more force on this part in particular. That was just not a good plan. They needed to rethink how these cores were structured, in my opinion. So anyway, with that said, everything else of the system I think was kind of fine. I don't have a problem with it. That in particular is a problem, but, everything else, caps just load in the back, pretty easy. They have kind of this, like, a line up here to help make sure the caps go in place correctly. That's nice. The feet, you kind of just put them, like, align them up with this part here. And then once it's lined up, you just push on the back part. And I didn't Did I not line that up correctly? I did not. Kind of just push them in, yeah, they just snap in the back. Very, very straightforward, even though I messed it up. The arm connection points. This is actually a big deal, because I actually like the arm connection points more on the prototype line compared to DX or Godcap. So, basically, the hold parts here have grooves on them, and you just kind of take them, and you just slide them on. It is very nice. Not a headache like the DX ones or the Godcap ones. They just slide on. I don't have a problem with how they slide on. It just works. So, good job there. And then for the head part, it's not like the head parts of DX and Godcap, it's just kind of like this headband piece. But hey, they use the kind of bottle, shape to work with this, and then it just kind of, goes on pretty easily. So as far as kind of the armor and stuff goes, I think they did a really good job. It's very intuitive. I have no problems with it. The customization is very simple and straightforward. But yeah, the core does have some problems. So for the system overall, did they do a good job with the core? Not really. It could have been better. Did they do a good job with kind of the armor and how it attaches? For sure. However, there is one other big problem with the system, and that is they just did not take accessories into account at all. There are no magazine ports on cores, and there are no barrel ports on cores. Why? So for the magazines, right? Aquasports. The magazine attaches via the arms, which just is annoying. Like, what was the purpose of this? Even like Raijing Milk, it's not actually the arms. Actually, this one is the core, I think. But they still had to make a special mold of the core for Raijing Milk to attach on. But then they didn't apply it to the other cores. They just had to make this one Bottleman special for its magazine. Again, that was a really stupid idea. Samets, its arms have like the cool part that tapers back. That's nice and all for an extra cap, but again, why not just have an actual magazine instead of using the arms? As far as barrels go, like we only have one real barrel, but a Skull Pistol. And Skull Pistol's barrel, it attaches onto the feet. Why? And if you even want to talk about, Gyokurock, well, the swords are just a part of the hands, or arms, whatever you want to call them, which are attached onto the hold parts there. So, yeah, there was just no regard for attachments in this line, which is my biggest problem with the line, actually. Even more than the cores, because the cores, that was a stupid idea for sure. But I can at least understand how something like that could get messed up, even though it was a really bad mess up. But with the magazines and the barrels and just whatever other accessories they could have done, not allowing any real customization for these things. Like, that was just an actually, like that was just an actually bad idea, It was really stupid, so the system design overall I can't say is the best. I think that overall, yeah, they kind of were limiting here for no reason. And yeah, I think that they could have made this much, much better, but they just opted to not for whatever reason, I guess. Okay, now we get to the game design of Bottleman. And I can't really show anything because I never really bought any of the sets with the games. Why not? Because the game design was bad. Every single game within this line boils down to hit the targets. There is nothing else interesting. Yes, obviously with something like Bottleman or Beat 'em On, you have to hit targets. That makes sense. But there's just nothing engaging about what Bottleman does. Beat 'em On had very different games that were much more engaging with hitting targets. Or something like, DHB especially, where you're kind of facing off against opponents directly. I can't talk. Give me a moment. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, when you had to face off against an opponent, moving your beat 'em on around with the DHB, it was engaging. Or even like, anything else, like Crash Towers, for example. There was a bigger goal there, but this is just hitting targets effectively. It's not fun. The closest we've ever come to an engaging game is Blast Boss. This thing, you put batteries in it, it moves around. It is a moving target. Okay, that's kind of cool. But it was kind of slow and needed batteries, and it was the only thing we ever really got like this. the game design in Bottleman, especially the prototype line, I would say, well, maybe not especially. Actually, they kind of did more in the prototype line than anything else, but, you know, that is what it is, I guess. But yeah, just the game design in general with Bottleman, I think, was just really bad, and the prototype line, I guess, again, you had Blast Boss, which is like the only thing that's remotely interesting, but again, it's not good. There's just nothing engaging. They tried out like the whole Switch game or whatever, but again, it's just not that interesting. Just breaking targets or whatever, or hitting down targets with nothing else, it's not interesting, you know? And they just did not get the game design right in Bottleman at all, and it was just clearly a problem from the start of the line right here. So when you look at the prototype system overall, how'd they do? Well, again, the actual Bottlemen themselves, they have some room for improvement, which is fine. But I think overall, with all the 14, they did pretty well. Yeah, they had some mess-ups here and there, but I think overall, yeah, they did fine. Fusions, again, room for improvement, some dumb mistakes, but overall, I like the fusions. I like what they did with them. The system design, too limiting. They needed to do more here, you know. There wasn't quite enough. But, you know, the way that they kind of designed the armor, I think they did well on, and the cores, the design's there, but again, you just had some really stupid mistakes. And yeah, the game design was just not good. They needed to do better here. And they needed to improve it, but, well, we'll talk about that in DX anyway. So overall, with the prototype line, did they do well? I would say yes, for the most part. I think, even though, you know, the game, they need to do better with the games, for sure. But still, stupid quality control mistakes, well, not quality control mistakes, but just like design mistakes, I guess I should say, that's fixable in later lines, you know, learn from it. And same with kind of the Bottlemen, you know, they had some mistakes with certain Bottlemen, you know, some of the gimmicks weren't all there. Also, they need to put more emphasis on customization, because there was a severe lack of that. And also maybe differentiate the Bottlemen here, because they're all pretty samey. But again, it's a lot of room for expanding, which I think is fine when you're looking at this as, you know, the prototype line of Bottleman, the first line of Bottlemen ever, and the first line of Beat-On, if you want to call them that, in many, many years. It's a solid reintroduction. So, overall, I think that they did a pretty good job, and I want to call it good, well, almost, but there is one glaring problem here. So I've been alluding to this the entire time, but the quality control of Bottleman, especially in the prototype line, was just not there. Again, that core connection point with how it kind of coincides with the hold parts being right next to it. These cores, especially these early cores, were just, they shattered. They just did. You know, Colamaru is a great example. This core, I don't shoot this core ever because, again, it's just, it'll break. You know, it'll develop stress marks on the core eventually, and then it'll break. A lot of people have stress marks on their cores because they just were not designed well. Again, that core point was a crucial mistake that really cost them. Did they fix it in later lines? Again, if I just grab like Salafire here, I guess. You know, it's a solid plastic, which is better for it, and they did make it a little bit better, a little bit. You know, it's just better constructed. You know, which is great and all, but it's still not all there. And also, they did eventually switch to the Vietnamese factory, which was nice, because, again, the quality is better. But again, with these initial releases, especially the original 6, I maybe say the original 3, because, well, Raid Brave had kind of a more unique core setup with the vertical core. And I think Raijing Milk and Fujin Black, they're solid plastic cores, so it's a little bit better. But yeah, the original 3, especially with Colamaru and its power type, you know, gimmicks and stuff, really poorly designed. And even the later ones I still think had problems. Even with the better factory, that connection point just was not a good idea. But also, the caps, the earlier caps, again, especially these original ones, being made in the Chinese factory, they don't shoot as well. Again, looking at Vietnamese caps, let me take the cap out of this, and let me grab just this other one here. You can probably just see, when I zoom in, that the ridges on the caps are different. They're more focused on this one, a little bit smaller, while they're a little bit larger on the Colamaru one. Therefore, yeah, these earlier caps are worse specifically because they kind of just catch easier. It's easier for them to kind of just catch on the hold parts, adds a little bit more tension, which sounds like it might be okay on paper, but in practice, it just makes them feel worse to shoot, which is unfortunate. And while the prototype line never fully sorted this out, I'd say, it got a little bit better, I guess, but yeah, it just, they weren't as good to shoot. I think with DX especially, you could tell that it was much, much better, but yeah. Also, there were just some individual quality control problems. Again, let's look at Fujin Black. This thing, its horn, it falls off. I touched it. It fell off. You saw that. I put, like, no force into that, and it just falls off. What was up with that? Like, that was just not well designed at all. I don't get why they had to go that route. Like, this easily could have had a better connection point. They just didn't make it. And they didn't fix it either, even with, like, the re-releases of Fusion Emerald and whatnot. Like, look at Samets, right? Samets has two quality control problems. First up, this thing, it gets jammed way too easily. You could see, you might be able to tell that this trigger's not coming out as much because I have to manually reset it a lot of the time. What's up with that? Like, yeah, that one worked. That one did not. Pull it out. And when you shoot, I don't want to really shoot this thing because, again, I'm always worried that these things are just going to explode. But anyway, you know, this part, when it shoots, you know, these kind of expand, and then this can expand outward on a shot, which can also lead to the cap kind of just flying out, the second one that is stored in the back here. Which, again, is unfortunate. Bad misstep. And also, CC-LAN, as I mentioned, when you try to use this thing's gimmick and turn it, oh, it has fallen off. So yeah, the quality control in the prototype line was just not good. They had some really dumb mistakes on specific Bottleman, but also, the core design in general was just really, really bad with breakage problems. And while they did fix it to some extent, it still just, again, wasn't a good connection point. It wasn't great. The quality needed to be up. You know, while it would eventually be better in DX, the prototype line, it's definitely much, much worse because of these issues, and is a pretty big problem I have with this line overall. Now, before I get to my kind of verdict here, there's one thing I want to mention in particular, which is, was this a good evolution to Beat'em? I would say yes and no. So first up, obviously, it was a 7-year gap between the end of Crossfight Beat'em and the start of Bottleman. Did they do a good job bringing kind of a new spin onto Beat'em? I would say, again, kind of. I think the way they kind of went about this, they referenced a lot of, you know, older stuff. They kind of went with some new ideas. You know, like the whole Ricochet idea, that was interesting, even though I don't care for it. You know, they were trying some other stuff, you know. And also sticking to some classics, like, you know, Colamaru here, with the drive strip, of course. Yeah, then they did some crazy stuff, like, you know, Blend Dragon and Premium Salafire. Pretty cool. And I think that, you know, it was a good attempt. But the problem is, if they just did a 5th actual gen of Beat'em, they could have done all of this, right? They could have maybe had, like, a crazy new Beat'em system. You know, done some of these more basic ones to reintroduce us, but then they could have done all of these things in Beat'em. So it kind of comes down to whether or not I think caps were a good idea, and I'm just going to say I don't think caps were a good idea. As much as I liked them at first, when it comes down to it, right, caps are far more limiting. Well, yes, you do get a new gimmick out of them with, you know, having them horizontal or vertical. Marbles just work better. And what's worse is that caps are also just significantly larger. These prototype Bottlemen, I feel like they're small in my mind, you know, compared to DX or Godcap, but really, these are pretty big, actually. They're pretty big compared to Beat'em. I mean, they're not, like, huge compared to them, but they're definitely bigger because of the cores. The cores, they have to be larger. And while, me personally, I don't mind that because I have giant hands, but I feel like, you know, just storing them and also just kind of dealing with some of their gimmicks can be clunky because, again, they have to be so much larger to accommodate these, you know, this new type of ammunition, which I don't think was a great move. And the whole push on recycling, okay, that's cool on paper, but here's the problem is that, well, in the packages, you literally didn't use paper or anything else. You used plastic again. you have like 4 plastic bags in here. Why? You know, you're using caps for these things. It's not going to save you when you're using 4 bags of plastic. Like, I get the angle, but man, it's just not it. It's not it. I don't think it was the best choice, and it definitely kind of haunts them, I think, you know? Especially when you look at some of the later stuff and how giant they are and how ridiculous it gets. You really could have toned some of these things down if you were using marbles instead of caps, because the cores could just be significantly better sized, and you can kind of reshape them to also just work better, I would say. They could have done a lot better, and they just kind of aren't, because, yeah, caps, they just really ended up limiting everything, I would say. And now we get to my verdict. Is the prototype system of Bottleman good? No, I don't think it is. I think that the crucial problem that they had with the core and just the general quality control, it holds everything back. Even if, you know, the way that they kind of work and how kind of the armor and how that connects and how they, you know, just function, you know, how cool each Bottleman is, how cool the fusions are. I feel like that's all undone by the quality control problems that they have. And even if you want to make arguments and say, well, you know, they kind of fixed some stuff, you know, it got better, sure. But also, again, it just doesn't have a real game to it. And I feel like because of that, yeah, the games are just so lackluster, it just kind of ends up being bland. And also, as an evolution to beat 'em, I don't think it really worked all that well. So yeah, my verdict on Bottleman, well, the prototype system anyway, is it good? No. I think that they just had too many problems and too many missteps for me to actually call it good. Is it bad, though? I would also say no. I don't think it's bad, but I also just don't think it's good. It's just kind of okay. Again, for a new line, I think they had a lot of good stuff, and while I don't agree with the shift to caps, they tried something new, I guess I could say that. You know, it was something. And while they had a lot of cool ideas, they are also equally as bland in other areas, and yeah, the quality control just really doesn't help here. So overall, it's an okay line and a decent, you know, attempt, but I think that Bottleman as a concept does have some crucial errors, but also they just needed to fix and expand upon this heavily before I can really call it good. So, that said, that is my whole video on the prototype line of Bottleman and what I think of it. Yeah, there you go. That's all for this video. I will do another one of these on DX fairly soon. So anyways, thanks for watching, and bye-bye.